All right, so thank you all once again, and it's a pleasure welcoming you to the second edition of the Lawyer's Diary. Today's topic is quite interesting, and we are going to discuss doing business in Ghana, but with specific zooming into instituting governance culture in small and medium scale companies or enterprise. Our guest today is lawyer Theophilus Ackom-Boadu. Lawyer Theophilus is the head of legal and company secretary for FBN Bank Ghana Limited. He concentrates more on corporate structure, corporate finance, and anything that has to do with banking. So today's topic is going to be a special topic in the banking industry and also SME, small and marketing enterprises. One will ask that what at all is a small and medium enterprise? We'll also find out what are some of the key features that the SME should have. And in case I'm a small SME and I want to come to the bank for facilities, what are some of the basic things that a bank will be looking out for? And what are the governance aspects that I need to put in place in order not to let my application be refused by the bank? And so I will invite lawyer Theophilus Ackom-Boadu. I'm very honored to have him with me, and it took a bit of time trying to get him because anytime you call him, he will tell you either I'm in a meeting, I've traveled here, but the corona has gripped him in Ghana. So we are much grateful. Joe, you can take over and then take us through what you have for us today.
All right, Onismos, thank you very much, and good evening to you and all your cherished listeners all over the world. It's an honor to be invited to your program and have the opportunity to share a little with you and your team. I must say that you and your team are doing a very good work, and I will ask that you continue doing that.
So you can take over.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. So, as our host just said, today we'll be looking at doing business in Ghana by way of instituting governance culture in small and medium scale enterprises. I don't know whether our attendees can see the slides that have been projected or shared on the screen. So one will ask why this topic, and it is very important that given the conditions prevailing at this particular moment in our country and in the world at large, we give particular attention to our SMEs, small and medium scale enterprises, and what we can do in our own small corner to build and sustain their existence. And that is what informed us to choose this topic. And so in this particular session, you'll basically be looking at what SMEs entail in general and their role they play in the country or in the economy, the definition of corporate governance in itself, a brief understanding of what corporate governance entails, then the governance culture that we can institute to build and sustain SMEs. Then the principles. In these principles, we have carefully looked at tailored principles. You know, corporate governance is very wide and broad. As a matter of fact, it's so wide that we cannot exhaust this within this small period of time. And so what we have done is to give due consideration to what pertains in Ghana with regards to SMEs, the legal and regulatory framework as it exists in Ghana, what is happening with our SMEs in the midst of this pandemic, and how these tailored principles can be applied to sustain their growth. So we start with what SME actually entails. And most often when people hear SMEs, what comes to mind is a tabletop enterprise or a backyard provision store that we see around. SMEs go far beyond that. And there have been a lot of debates and theories about what actually, or which and what enterprises constitute SME. Are we looking at asset base? Are we looking at sales volume? Are we looking at revenue capacity? Are we looking at customer base or market dominance? Or we are looking at number of employees? Now, these criteria are often used based on the particular purpose or the objective of the theory or the research, but the most commonly accepted criteria is the number of employees. And with this, we are looking at 250, an establishment with 250 employees being the most dominant and commonly used cut-off points in defining the upper boundary of an SME. And so if there's an establishment that has 250 employees or less, we are looking at classifying that establishment or that business under an SME. And so with this, our understanding is shaped to mean that SME may even include rural banks which have regional jurisdiction. SMEs may include mining companies, may include microfinance institutions, manufacturing companies, savings and loans, any institution or company that you can think of, no matter how wide or big it is. With this criteria, we are looking at the number of employees. So if a company has 150 employees throughout the whole country, 200, 150, 30, 40, they all fall under the bracket of SMEs. And so the principle here basically are tailored to suit such classification, ranging from one-man business, unregistered enterprise, up the way to a fully fledged corporate institution that fall under this category. So going forward, we will be looking at the dominant features of what actually characterizes SMEs. And yes, and so we have here, as we always see around, in fact, almost all SMEs, except with the big institutions such as the banks and the microfinances that are highly regulated. Most SMEs predominantly do not have board, except for ones that have been registered as a limited company. And even with such companies, their board exists on paper and in the registration documents. But in actual fact, most SME don't have a running or effective board in place. You cannot clearly distinguish the roles of board management or the shareholder. Most often, even if such units in the governance system exist, they are occupied by the same number of people. You cannot clearly identify who the shareholder is or the owner is, who the director is, who the management people or people who drive the business are. They are all fused together. That is also one of the dominant features. And for some, what we have is seeing the SME owner mixing its personal affairs or family affair with that of the business. For most SMEs, we are looking at the owners financing their personal activities or personal affairs from the funds of the company, not clearly distinguishing or differentiating the affairs of the owner or the family activities from that of the business. So personal affairs are mixed with the business, whilst others dedicate their business to friends and families and religious foes to manage on the basis of empowerment. People have a philosophy that their friends are there, their relatives are there. So they lose sight of the need to get the right people in the right hands to manage their business. Once you fall within the bracket of their religious buddies or friends or relatives, it is good to employ them. And that is a common thing that we find around. Most importantly, most SMEs also do not maintain proper books of accounts. And these are common because they feel they are not accountable to anybody. It is their business. They don't spend time, they don't spend time, invest or make sure that the proper books of accounts in regards to sales volume, sales projections, strategic objectives, the goals, performance monitoring, among others, are maintained. What they know is at the end of the day, at the end of the week, or at the end of the month, what profit are we making is enough to get going. For them, once the profits keeps coming, the rest are not that necessary. Now, one thing that comes with SMEs is the ability to make quick decisions with flexibility and with ease. And this inherently makes the nature of SMEs to grow quickly and take advantage of the opportunity that comes with agility, as compared to big companies that have to do a lot of consultations and stuff. However, the ability to be flexible and action quickly also comes with an increased risk of poor decision-making, vulnerability to economic forces, and lack of appropriate skills and experience. And so the more it becomes easy for enterprises or companies, or in quotes, one-man companies to take decisions and take advantage of temporal opportunities, the more they become prone or vulnerable to risk, market risk and forces that comes with such decisions. With this presentation, what we'll be looking at essentially is how to empower SMEs to find a way that they can grow rapidly and yet in a sustainable manner, supported by the right structures and resources that governs and focuses on growth. Having spoken a little or given an overview of what SMEs basically entails, let's now focus on governance in general and what governance actually entails. Now, I believe most of us are not new to governance and what it entails. In fact, in every part of our lives, we govern, we manage. To govern is to manage. And so a person may decide to manage his finances. A person may decide to manage or govern his time, manage or govern your career or future career, your academic pursuits, your future endeavors. So one way or the other, we are all governors or managers. When you look at the state level or the national level, our governments, their duty is just to govern. And so governance is not new to us. However, in the context of corporate governance, what we are looking at is how institutions or companies are governed, how they are managed. In this regard, we are looking at the key principles that regulate or guide directors, managers, shareholders, the entity as a whole, and its stakeholders to achieve its goals. So corporate governance in its basic form, we are looking at how to coordinate and facilitate information flow and relationship between the three units of an institution: the board, the directors, and the management. So basically, we are looking at, in essence, bridging the gap between the board and management in the way that sits with the cultural values and norms of the company. In every institution, every company, be it a small company, be it medium, or even the multinational companies, there are three basic units that must exist for a successful governance structure to be instituted and to be sustained. We are looking at the first level being the shareholders or the owners. In this slide, I've taken the opportunity to name such people SME owners or shareholders. Shareholders are mostly used for large institutions, but for SMEs, let's be comfortable with the term SME owners. And so we have the SME owners, we have the directors, and we have the management, those who drive the objectives of the company into fruition, those who see to it that it has come to life, the objectives have been actualized. So in basic form, we are looking at bridging the gap between the board, the management, and the directors. And with this gap, if you look at what has led to the collapse of companies and what has led to a collapse of multinational institutions, it's most often about this gap. Shareholders invest for a return, and by so doing, they appoint people to manage their investments. These people are being the directors. The directors are not with the company at every given point in time. They meet either quarterly, half yearly, or on ad hoc basis, based on the nature and the complex nature of the business and also the regulatory regime. Management are the ones that takes up the objectives and the directions of directors and make sure that these directives have been brought to light. Now, the basic thing that we have to look at here is the essence of governance. The essence is to manage this gap. No matter how skillful a board or directors are, when the flow or the channel of communication is not managed in a way that sits well with the understanding and the cultural values of management, that gap is fatal. And if this gap, if not managed, may render the board ineffective in their responsibilities, no matter how effective and efficient they are, and ultimately lead to the collapse of the organization. Next, I would like to take us through some of the impacts of poor governance culture, or when institutions fail to adhere to corporate governance directive. Now, before you even come to Ghana, in fact, in the 90s and subsequent, the corporate world has witnessed a massive revolution of fraud and governance scandals. We can't talk of outside when in our own country, the Bank of Ghana in 2017 announced its approval for the takeover of two indigenous banks, UTA and Capital Bank, by JCB. And the basic reason is insolvency. Citing similar reasons, insolvency and other matters, BOG also announced the consolidation of 5 banks into CBG. We will go into the details of the collapse, and I think it's even a well-known facts of what led to the collapse of these institutions. The basic underlying principle is non-adherence to proper and effective corporate governance practices, non-disclosures, among the rest. Now, beyond Ghana, we can think of giant multinational institutions in the US, the famous Enron scandal in 2001, which went down together with Arthur and Anderson, at the time, the biggest audit firm in the world. And together with this, the net effect was that about 8,000 employees lost their job. Governance principles is not a joke, it's not an option. You may decide to do it your own way, but the objective here is sustainability. The likes of Tyco International, Peregrine Systems, and the Welcome, along with Lehman Brothers. I hope most of us are familiar with Lehman Brothers, the 4th largest US investment bank, around 2008. All these big companies were victims of this corporate governance non-adherence. This led to loss of about 487 billion of shareholders' value. Now, beyond UK, beyond US, UK also suffered a similar fate. We can talk of Polypeg, Bank of Credit and Commerce International, Maxwell Communications in the 90s, which led to billions of dollars being lost. In Australia, for instance, OneTel and HIH insurance resulted in liquidated loss of around 5.3 billion Australian dollars for insurance shareholders alone. The impact of governance and governance structures, if not adhered to, can be disastrous. New Zealand, notwithstanding their excellent governance track record, over a period of 4 years leading to 2011, lost 16 finance companies with a net loss of 3.45 billion New Zealand dollars of public investors. Now, the basic or the underlying cause for all of these collapse has been reported to have been misreporting and improper disclosures by the board and management, poor credit analysis, insider and related party lending, compromise of directors' fiduciary duties, among others, leading to loss of investment, especially public confidence, loss of jobs, and among others. One will ask that, why are we citing multinational companies when we are looking at SMEs? The thing is, SMEs do collapse. In fact, they do collapse almost every day, but they don't take attention. These multinational companies are the ones that take the media, that have the media coverage, and we get to hear of it. That notwithstanding, these collapse is what prompted several institutions and several civil society to delve into or research into the causes, the causative issues, and what's brought about, and how to manage and focus on avoiding future occurrences. Our next slide will just focus on corporate governance culture. Now, the objective of, or what we intend to achieve with this presentation, is not just to share with us principles that you can just follow. Principle 1, do this, don't do that. We are not just trying to share do's and don'ts that will make your company last. We are looking at a governance culture. And culture takes a longer time to develop. It takes a longer time to develop and takes a longer time to change. And so what we are focusing on this presentation is to try to communicate and instill the discipline of governance culture. When this culture is well adhered to and instituted, with or without the presence of shareholders or directors, management and the entire staff are all aligned with the objectives and the strategic intent of all stakeholders. So it is important that at this stage, before we begin to share with us the principles as outlined in the presentation, for us to note that these principles are not quick fix or short-term solutions to a business crisis. Here, we are focusing on a long-term plan, a plan that will help a business establish itself in terms of its governance practices, a long-term that will help promote the practices of a company. So it is a long-term commitment to a new organizational approach that takes time to develop and build momentum with demonstrable clear values. It's a process that we intend to achieve rather than a program that evolves around the business. So with the right attitude and the necessary commitment, the successful implementation of these principles is surely guaranteed. So we are looking at a long-term principle here and not just a quick fix kind of thing. Here we go. So here we are looking at, first, look at establishing and choosing the right team. We are looking at establishing first and choosing the right team. So the direct connection between holding shares on paper and the rights to board membership is a faulty logic believed by most SME owners. Most SMEs are established by 2 or 3 friends, 2 or 3 people who believe they share a common vision or a common objective. So they team up to form a company. They contribute money for the running or for the starting of the company. Now, the commonly held belief is that once I'm a shareholder, I must have my representation on the board, or I must be a board member. And that is a very dangerous thing that most SMEs fall into, especially for those who are not literate in governance processes. once I'm part of the promoters or I'm part of the first directors of the company and I've invested money for the startup, I must be on the board of the company. Some may have the money to start to invest, but the competence to drive the business is another thing altogether. It is important that at this stage, SME owners first appreciate that the objective to invest is one thing, and how the objective is actualized or achieved is another thing altogether. It's important that SMEs appoint the right mix of executive and non-executive directors to the board, and more importantly, accept and be ready to live with the new authority of the board over the business as the first step in the governance process. Most often, the issue of trust comes in when they have invested, when owners have invested their money, set up a company, and now want to entrust it into the hands of someone else to manage. And so the first step is to appreciate the fact that to be a board member is not just on paper, it's not just a title. To be a board member comes with a lot of fiduciary and a lot of legal obligations. If I want to look at the Companies Act, there are numerous obligations, in fact, statutory obligations that are imposed on directors of companies that they have to comply with. And so first appreciating the fact that being a board member comes with a lot of obligations, which most SMEs do not possess. Secondly, being a board member comes with the right competence and the right knowledge, skills, experience, and the expertise to drive the objectives of the company. So SME owners must first appreciate and acknowledge that fact and not always be the one to be on the board. Well, fine, it is good to be on the board to protect your interests whenever decisions are being made not to your interest. But it is always important to appoint somebody with the right competence and the right skills and experience to represent you on the board. That is a very important thing that we have to look at. Now, we have spoken of establishing the board in itself. Now, so for new companies that have been established, it is important for the promoters to appreciate the business and how to achieve it and put in place the right mix of directors to manage the company. For startups or for existing companies who are already in the business and they now want to inculcate these principles to bring about change, what is important is for them to first appreciate this fact and also reconsider the board composition. Do they have the right mix of directors? Do they have the right mix of competence in terms of collective competence of the board? Do they have that in place? If they deem themselves not fit for the job, it's important they step back and appoint people that they trust with the right knowledge to occupy the place, the board. The role of non-executive director is to bring independent and challenging thoughts whilst holding management accountable, and by so doing, establish governance principles and understanding to meet the needs of the SME. Now, when a shareholder or an SME owner starts a business, in the first place, they put or invite their colleagues and their friends or their wives and children and family members or church folks to be on the board. This is very dangerous and it's a very big mistake that most SMEs do. What happens is that familiarity sets in, and that's when a shareholder during board meeting is also a board member in the meeting. He tends to assert his authority and he tends to assert his influence as a shareholder to influence decisions that will not augur well in the long run for the company. When decisions are being made as to appointment of MD CEOs, appointment of finance directors, appointment of people with rights, skill, and experience to occupy the most important part or role of the business. Shareholders intend to bring their people on board just because they are the owners and board members are not able to stand up to it. And so it is important that the right mix of board composition should include non-executive directors. When we say NED, we are talking of people who do not hold positions in the company. So we have executive directors, maybe a CEO or a finance director, a finance manager who is also part of the board. So he's an executive director. Non-executive directors are those who do not hold any position in the company. And so in this regard, it's important for shareholders to appoint unrelated third parties with right knowledge and understanding to add up to the value of the company in achieving its objectives. Now, in establishing or choosing the right team, attention ought to be given to the fact that there's what we call the collective energy of the board. There are board, I've seen some board that are good in talking and only talking without being achievers. Some board have a lot of ideas to bring on the table. When they meet, they discuss a lot of ideas and plans, but the energy to push it, the energy to ensure monitoring and supervision of management to bring it to fruition is not there. You might not have all directors having the right energy, having the right energy as required, but the right mix or the composition of this membership is very key to achieve the desired result. And so attention must be given to the natural energy of the individual directors, which culminates into the collective energy of the board. So here, beyond the skills and the knowledge and the experience and the big names and titles that we go for to occupy our board, we have to also look at the energy. Are they just talking and not doing? Are they people who can bring about manifestation of objectives? Are they people who can ensure that with the right link, with the right exposure, they can bring to the actualization of the company's objectives? Now, there are studies, and I do share with this, that in establishing and putting in place your board, in fact, I'm stressing so much on the board because in essence, SMEs is all about the board and the independence of the board to do their work with minimal or no interference at all from the shareholder side. And so, yes, there are 8 principles that have been tailored to suit SMEs in our environment, in our markets, in our economy. But the most important focus now is on the board. The board is so key and is very important in achieving anything with regards to SME sustenance. The influence of SME owners or the influence of promoters of SMEs are so unbearable. And when board are trying to achieve something, they are normally hindered by these influences. And so in achieving or in selecting the right team for the road ahead, the task ahead, it's important to initially avoid appointing industry experts, such as independent directors instead of managers, as the similarity in industry knowledge makes it difficult to focus only on the industry. Now, imagine that you want to set up a health facility. Now, all the board members are made up of doctors. All of them are made up of doctors. They will be myopic in their thinking and in their analysis of, one, the industry, two, the company itself, and might lose sight of what needs to be done actually in the company itself or in the facility itself. And so in the first place, what we are looking for is that the best approach in organizing or putting in place your team is to first have to consider bringing on board experts from different fields, rather than making up the board solely of people in the same industry. So if you are setting up a construction firm and your board is made up of only engineers, there will be a problem. And so by practice, it's not allowed, or it is not ideal to have that when you are choosing your team. What happens is that they lose sight of the underlying business model and the operational strategy that seeks sustenance and growth of the company. They focus more on the industry rather than the sustenance, the structure that will seek the sustenance of the company. Now, it is often heard, and I've had several encounters with shareholders, that one of the cardinal reasons that they object to appointing non-executive directors to their board and rather choose their friends and their relatives is the issue of seasonal allowance and directors' fees and TNTs and stuff like that. But I tend to disagree with them. And I will share my reasons very soon. You see, well-meaning directors are not after money. Money may be part later, but well-meaning directors who appreciate the role and the significance of SMEs in building the economy or in the society, and who understands the vision and objective of the company will not put money first before joining your company. They first look at one, the long-term objective of the institution that is inviting him to be part, and whether it will benefit the society. One. Secondly, whether it is worth the time to spend in being the board member. And remember, being a board comes with obligations, as I've mentioned. And so before one commits him or herself to be a board member, it has to worth it. And being worth it, we are looking at whether the SME has a promising future and whether they are ready to sacrifice to see to the long-term sustainability of the company and what it takes to do that. Most often, people join board just so that they can give back to SME sector, which they know is critical for the growth and development of the economy. And most often, NEDs also or NED also join board just to keep in embodying the understanding of governance through practical experience and application of the governance principles. Others also join, in addition to offering their expertise, also learn on the job how companies are managed. So in fact, it's actually an honor for a NED or a non-executive director to serve on the board of a company. And it's not about money or always about money, especially when it has got to do with SME. Of course, for big corporations, the big multinational institutions, people even lobby to be on the board just so to benefit from the opportunity that comes with this. But for SMEs, the directors with the right information, the right experience and exposure, skills and knowledge to contribute to the growth of the company do not put money first. And so I do not agree and I do not share with people's view that they don't have the means to pay directors' fees and allowances. In my experience, when an SME has a big promise and a manifest commitment to making a real difference in whatever form it takes, it will attract the right directors with incredible minds and governance experience to realize their promise. So this would all the casting for our first principle on directors. I have to try and cover all of that. Our second principle, we want to look at KYS, know your structure. What structure do you want to put in place? Now, for existing companies, we are looking at first knowing your structure itself. Before you can think of improving or bringing on board different structures, first acknowledge and appreciate the fact that what is my existing structure? What do I have? What do I have in place? Before you can now make recommendations or do the necessary adjustments where is it necessary. For new companies, a newly incorporated company, what ought to be asked or what ought to be determined is what is the ideal structure that given the peculiar nature of the business, given the complex nature of our product, given the market space or the industry we find ourselves, the ideal structure that will help us survive in the industry or the market. And so it is very important for one to first appreciate and know the structure that it intends to adopt. There cannot be any meaningful journey to establishing a strong and effective governance structure without understanding and appreciating the tenets of the existing one. It's important for, first of all, appreciate the status quo of the existing structure before you can now advise on what needs to be done on it. So here, per structure, we are looking at proper documentation of the business profile and activities, director, details of directors, management, shareholders, defined nature of business, etc. for stakeholder references. Now, the structure is very key here. In fact, when we have put up your team, so it's like a step, we are building a journey, we are going on a journey. You've put up a company. We talk about having in place the board and how to choose your board, what goes into choosing your board, the right mix of directors that will help you achieve your objective. When that is done, it's up to the board to also decide the structure that needs to be taken to achieve the company's objectives. Now, it is important that at this moment you see, whatever you start becomes the norm or becomes the culture. It is different if it is ongoing and not going to change. But for startups or for people new to the industry or new to the company, whatever you start and how you start it becomes the norm. And it's important that right things are done. Now, in looking at your structure, we're looking at putting in place proper documentation. Some companies don't even, the directors are actually people whose name appear on RGD documents and nothing more. Nobody can tell who a director is. So the right information should be properly documented. Details of directors, details of management, details of shareholders, define nature of the business for the stakeholder references. Now, it is important we get the why these things ought to be put in place. Most SMEs run a paperless system, and that is one man owned. So as and when something needs to be done, then it is done. But that will not help in regards to long-term sustenance of companies. Now, for financial institutions, the reason why this information is very, very important, after you have put in your structures, including proper documentation of documents, is that SME most often will need financial assistance. When your business model is ideal and people buy into it, not only just banks, but investors, partners who want to associate themselves with the objective of the company and want to invest in it. So in that regard, people want to look at the details of the company, what makes up the company, who are behind it, and stuff like that. So it is critical for SMEs to put in place these documents, especially when they are applying for loans or they are seeking assistance from financial institutions. Now, note that for financial institutions, they are also regulated, and these regulations also boils down to what they need to do with regards to giving out loans to customers. One of the key things that banks are enjoined to do by the regulator, Bank of Ghana, FIC, Financial and Intelligence Center, the country's anti-money laundering and counter-finance and terrorism laws, and other state institutions laws, all enjoin banks to put in place comprehensive KYC or know your customer documentations before you can even start off dealing with customers. So for individual customers, fine, but for corporate customers, the law is robust and exhaustive with regards to what needs to be put in place and what needs to be done before you can even access a loan facility or any form of assistance from a financial institution. So from day one, it is important that an SME have these things in place. Now, for banks, granted that after starting up, you want to source a loan facility from a financial institution, say a bank. What are the things that needs to be met? What are the things that need to be put in place for you to have access to these facilities? If your company, if your business is not registered and it's just an enterprise, know that enterprises are not known as entity in law. First, I will appreciate or I will advise that you get a business registered. If it's just an enterprise, get a business name registered. That is one. If it's not a company limited and it's just a sole proprietor kind of thing, get the name registered so that you can register or you can open an account in the name of the registered name. If it's a company, you put in place the right documentations and ensure that in opening an account and accessing these facilities, the right documentation should be made available. Now, for a bank in Ghana to grant a facility to a corporate customer, on the minimum, these are the requirements that will be asked for. And so you make sure that you put in place a board resolution. And that means that if the board are not meeting, there cannot be a resolution to be passed. So there must be the company must have a board. The board must have met and discussed, deliberated, have the minutes of the meeting duly recorded, and an extract of the board resolution done to the effect that the board or the company's board want to apply for a facility. This board resolution must be duly signed. You must also have in place a well-documented finances of the company in terms of audited finances. You don't need to be a multinational company before you can appoint auditors. Whichever form of business or the level of state that you are in your business, an auditor can come and check your finances and give you a financial statement. That will be required. It is important that as a business or as a company, on day-to-day basis or monthly basis or quarterly basis, you get auditors to come and audit your books and advise you on what needs to be done, on what books to maintain. So a typical bank like where I belong, FBN Bank, one of the solid brand banks in Ghana, we will request you to furnish us with your business dynamics, ultimate beneficial owners of the business. In this regard, you're looking at the shareholders, people with 5% or more shareholding in the company, the management structure, and its effectiveness among the board. There are a lot of requirements that comes in with this, but with regards to opening accounts and applying for a facility, due regard is given to the type of facility being requested and the nature of business that the customer is engaged in. If the corporate customer finds itself in an industry that is highly regulated, it will request for a license to operate in that industry. If the license is not expired, a duly issued license, a duly incorporated certificate of incorporation, certificate to commence business, and other documents that are required based on the specific industry that a customer finds him or herself or where the company operates. So for instance, an insurance company must bring us license from the National Insurance Commission that gives it the power to operate as an insurance company, among others. So having said that, it's important that you know your structure, you put in place the right structures and ensure that proper documents are maintained, books of accounts are maintained. Now shareholders or stakeholders are aware that they're diverse in this regard. We have the tax authorities coming in to check your books. You have your employees, you have your investors, you have shareholders all interested in these informations. Next, we look at one key thing that SME owners need to adhere to treat the business as a separate entity from their personal affairs. And this is very, 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 very important. Now, for most SMEs, owing to their small size nature of their business, you most often see the shareholder or the owner personally being at the helm of affairs of the company, which I call owner managers or SME managers. Now, I have seen and witnessed a lot of institutions with very high promising future. However, upon the death of the owner, the company collapsed. The children are not able to take over. The board are not able to take over. Meanwhile, a company is supposed to be a separate legal entity with its management structure different and independent of the owner or the shareholders. It is important that SME owners sacrifice, and not even sacrifice, come to the place of appreciating the fact that the company is there not for themselves alone, even though the return comes to them. Others have interest and stakes in it. The community have stakes in it. They have employees that have family that depends on it. The state have stakes in it. That's by way of revenue or taxes. RGD has stakes in it. A lot of people have stakes in it. So it is important that owners take the time to appreciate and come to the place where they try to separate themselves, their activities, and their relationship with the company, and respect the board that they themselves have put in place to do their work. They may come in for just advisory purposes and be informed of what is happening, but to the extent of being personally involved, it's become problematic. And it is good that with the right skill and experience, an owner will want to start it up and leave it for others to manage. That is fine. That is very good. But there's always a point where, owing to the growing nature of the business and owing to competition, market demands, and industry statistics, you hand over to competent people to manage while you just sit back and observe and just familiarize yourself with whatever happens in the company. This will make the company have a long, sustainable future. So you separate your business, you treat it as a separate legal entity as far as possible. Now, shareholders should be able to account for their end-of-year returns on their investments vis-a-vis the capital that they have injected, like sales volumes and projections, asset size, and stuff. That is there. But interference with regards to drawings, we have witnessed instances where owners of businesses take their housekeeping money from the company's finances. We've had instances where shareholders or owners buy properties from the company's accounts. They send their kids to school abroad or from the company's accounts, and they don't keep proper accounts of all these expenses. And so with this in mind, one key way of treating the company as a separate entity is to treat all drawings as such per the company's books. And so when there's a need to take something out of the company, be it raw materials, be it company's products, be it money, it should be recorded as such and same reflected in the books of the company for stakeholders. The next principle we want to talk about is what I call it the challenge of the three hats. The challenge of the three hats. Now, governance, in essence, seeks to just resolve the differences and support the complex dynamic nature or the difference between governance seeks to resolve the relationship between shareholders, directors, and management. These are the three key units of every company. Now, as has already been said, these are almost always done by the same people. Now, the three hats is what is key here. Someone wearing the shareholder hats must focus on his investment return and the risk that comes with it. And by so doing, you appoint competent auditors and directors to ensure accountability and steady return on investments. Now, the directors are to see to the strategic objectives of the company. the auditors are to ensure that directors' objectives are always aligned with that of the shareholder. Most often, let me say this, most often, one of the hindrances to people relinquishing authority and control of their business to another set of people is fear of mismanagement and fear of appropriation of funds. And so that's what we call agency cost. Now, directors, shareholders appoint, directors cease to work to satisfy the interest of the shareholder. It is possible, and there's a potential for directors to misalign their interests or their objectives different from that of the shareholders. It's possible for directors to now make their objective, make the to now focus their attention on their selfish interest. And so shareholders, what shareholders need to do is to now spend extra in what we call agency cost. And this involves costs directed at putting in place measures and mechanisms or control measures to ensure that management and directors are always aligned with the objectives of the company and shareholders' interest. So shareholder appoints an auditor to control and direct the affairs of the to control directors and management, and also appoint directors to manage the company. Now, to wear directors' hats comes with the responsibility to steer the affairs of the business for growth, and also delivers on stakeholders' return. Most SME owners are very quick to call themselves directors. In fact, when you enter a typical SME company, especially in Kumasi, everybody there is a director. You have director of finance, director of you have director of finance, director of marketing, director of salesperson, director of, even a security guy can even be called director of security. But you see, it is important to state here that per our laws in Ghana, yes, there are ways that a person can be held accountable. When, in fact, the main line is for you to have been duly appointed as a director and your documents filed at RGD. That is one. When somebody also allow himself to be referred to as a director in law, it also amounts. It's also the law appreciates and recognize such a person as a director. So if you're not a duly appointed director, however, your designation or the company refers to you as a director, or you yourself, you allow yourself to be called as a director. In fact, all the obligations that comes with duly appointed directors also will be apportioned to you. And so it is important that we take note of this and ensure that the terms are not used anyhow.
Joe, do you have more slides? Because it's almost 8. We need to ask questions and then.
Yes, I'm almost done. Done. Right. So here we are looking at setting the right relationship. Shareholders, as we've said, invest for a return. The board champions the promise or the vision, and management brings the promise to life. One of the key things that hinders this relationship is the separation of these roles. And most, as have been said, most managers, SME owner, assert their authority on the board, and this brings about a lot of issues. It becomes worse when the director or the SME owner is a board member and also the CEO of the company. Such a situation where the CEO is not performance monitored, the directors cannot also monitor the CEO because he's the shareholder. Who are you to go and monitor as a CEO? And so in this regard, we are looking at setting the right relationship. And as has been spoken of earlier on, when the principles are adhered to, such a situation will be avoided in the first place. So these have all been spoken of, setting the right relationship. And here, when the board, in performing their duties, first have to set in place the strategic objectives and the goals of the company. In this regard, we are looking at not just setting up the company, not just setting up the goals and objectives on paper, but also making sure that each and every management member and staff across the company understands where the company is going, understand the vision and the goals of the company, and one, clarifying it and amplifying it. One, clarifying this and amplifying it is very important, so that all will be aligned with regards to where the company is with regards to where the company is and where it intends to go in the next few years. Most often, directors are tempted to believe that management, including staff, has a clear understanding of this objective, which is also dangerous. Directors may understand where they want to go, but this understanding must be shared. It is in the sharing and it's in the understanding of this objective by the entire staff and management team that brings about the change. And it is with this that makes the entire team align with that of the directors to be able to achieve the objective. I think our last two slides, I would dedicate it to what is normally referred to as the board expedition calendar. Now, planning cannot be taken out of the governance culture. It's important that you always plan and plan well. Whenever it comes to planning for corporates, it's not an option. No. It's important for board to map out the various focused business themes that reinforces the overall business planning and ensure that the workflow throughout the cycle is in its appropriate sequence and is very comprehensive across all the business sectors. And so with this affords the board and even management and staff the opportunity to align themselves with the rhythm of the governance process. It also lessens the burden of always having to change for board purpose, as every HOD or every management member knows when board meeting will be held and prepares towards it in terms of board purpose, requests and approvals, and the stipulated report to be furnished the board. Regular meeting is one key thing that will help bridge the gap or improve the relationship between the board and management. This helps management to able to track issues that will be raised by the board and ensure that they are properly done. This is as compared to where board rarely meets once or twice in a year. And at the end of the day, management is left with bulky action points and directions to deal with. This is very key on this much, and I would love that every director or every shareholder or every director or even every key management personnel adhere to this disclosure of conflict of interest. Now, we grew up in society. We have schooled, we work in companies, and with my last slides, I would like to stress on the fact that there is always an opportunity or a chance where somebody knows someone who knows someone and also knows someone. And so it's important that as board members with fiduciary obligation to the shareholder and to the company itself, it's important that we always disclose whatever interest that we have with regards to the company. Now, it is not just your interest in the company that you need to disclose, but your interest in any other company or transaction or any firm that intends to have a relationship with the company, or the company now intends to have a relationship with your interested company. Now, the duty to self-disclose this interest survives solely on the honesty and integrity of the individual directors of the company. This disclosure is not just about saying that I have an interest in this company, but also the timing of the disclosure is also very important. The time at which you disclose. Now, at board meetings, directors are obliged by law to disclose any interest they have. These interests of in this disclosure may be general in terms of whatever interest that you may have with any company at all, not even related with the board, the company of the board that you are serving on. But the fact remains that at every board meeting, based on the agenda or the item to be that they deliberated upon, it's important that a director to a meeting to disclose whatever interest that he has to avoid conflict of interest. Now, the failure of most SMEs and even large multinational corporations are characterized by improper, inaccurate, and insufficient, and in some cases, no disclosure of interest at all. There are also meeting-specific disclosures that need to be made by the directors.
Sure.
Yes. So,
please, now this is the last slide. Okay.
Yes. So, it is important that we adhere to the disclosure of conflict of interest. If a company intends to engage in any transaction or want to engage a vendor to supply a service or to render a service, any interest of the directors must be disclosed, and deliberations with regards to that company must not include such director with the interest. In conclusion, what we are saying is that SMEs are key and play a very important role in our economy and in building the nation. Times of economic crisis have shown that SMEs play a key role in driving economies out of chaos back into its flow of job creation, innovation, and economic growth. The need to focus, nurture, and grow and drive SMEs as a critical part of our business cycle cannot be overemphasized. When we fail to recognize these facts, we rob future generations of the world's biggest companies that we are yet to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Theo, for this very exciting and deep analysis you've given us. We are very grateful. There are a number of questions that you need to answer. The first one is from Mr. Paul. Mr.
Okay.
Paul Zello. He wants to find out that is corporate governance important for an SME with like 5 employees who might be mainly family and friends? That's the first question.
Okay. Now let me take it as you ask. And so these principles, in fact, corporate governance are always tailored. The principles are always tailored, depending on the nature of the business, depending on the establishment, depending on the industry you find yourself, depending on where you also want to go in the first place. Now, I am determined to believe that it will not remain 5 employees forever and ever. I believe the promoters or the owners of that enterprise have a long-term objective in mind to grow the company. And it's important that you put in place these measures at the initial stage before others come to join. Now, what you come to see is what you do. So when it has become big and people are coming to join, that is when it has become difficult to change. And so I will say, and I will advise that I will advise for these principles to be implemented at this initial stage. If anything at all, you may want to look at the documentations that need to be put in place. Yes.
But it's possible that currently, let's take it as current. I have just 5 members. Most of the members are myself, my wife, my 3 kids. Do we still need to institute the corporate governance thing as it stands now? For future, yes, but currently, do I need it?
Yes, you need it. You might not, all the principles might not be necessary in your present circumstances, but with regards to the fact that there might be a need for you to access a facility from a bank, there might be a need to pay your tax, which will be based on records. There might be a need to probably think of partnering with somebody else who want to know what goes into the business. All these things are relevant, which the principles of governance on putting in place the right structure and the right documentations is very, very important and key, at least for your sales records, revenue, projections, capital investments are all important. That needs to be documented to guide people who are interested.
Okay, and then the next question is from Dennis Amwati. He wants to find out that, do you consider, when you are explaining the small business enterprise, you said that it depends on the number of people that you employ, from 1 to 250.
Yes.
Do we not consider the capital investment in terms of the money that I am putting in? So if I have like $1 million investing in a company in Ghana, does that affect me being considered as an SME or what? Or does an SME also be defined by the registration process? If I'm just an enterprise, I'm a limited liability company, at what point am I? There are two questions. In terms of registration, is a limited liability company an SME or just an enterprise as an SME? And then does it also involve the capital that I put in that will make me an SME?
Okay. Now, in the presentation, I mentioned that there are a number of criteria. And now the choice of criteria depends on the purpose or the objective with which you intend to use the analysis for. And so you may choose to go by the net sales volume. You may want to go by the net assets capacity. You may want to go by the capital investment. But most predominantly, people prefer to use the number of employee base and the 250 employee being the cutoff point. Yes, I don't know whether that answers the question. So you should per assets base or per capital injection, there are criteria that restrict it, as in the cutoff points. But with regards to our purposes, in regards to our discussion, I chose to go by the predominantly used criteria, which is the number of employees.
And then David Hagan also asked a question. When you were explaining the requirements for an SME to get a loan from the bank, you mentioned board resolution.
Yes.
As a requirement. His question is that when you say a board resolution, does all the board members need to sign? In an instance where the board, one of the board members is not in the country, like we have 4 board members, 3 are in the country, what happens to the other person? Do we need all 4 signatories or without?
Okay.
The bank will still accept it.
Okay. Now, per the Companies Act, a board resolution duly signed by a secretary and a board member, or at least 2 directors, is sufficient and enough for all purposes. So you don't need all directors to sign before you can rely on it. So a company secretary is well authorized to sign together with any director. Board chairman is preferable.
And then Dennis also asked, please, if you have any question, you can type it or you can unmute yourself and then ask the question. Dennis also asked another question that you said, if, say, I work for a travel and tour called Inus Travel, I need a permit from the Ministry of Tourism. And then my permit has expired, but it is being renewed. I've submitted all documents to the regulators. I've paid the registration fee, but I don't have the permit. So, will the administrative lapse of the authorities be classified as me not being able to satisfy what the bankers need? Did you get the question?
So he's asking that. Can you come again on that?
So the question is that in your presentation, you indicated that one of the requirements is a license, like I should bring authorization permit or license.
Yes.
I work for this company. My license has expired, but I'm renewing it. I've submitted all the documentations to the regulators. I've paid the registration fee, but I've not been granted the license. Would the bank not consider my payment as enough evidence to go ahead with the loan, or they will still wait until I get? What if, as at the time they come back, the purpose for which I needed a loan would have been defeated? How do you answer that?
Okay, all right, thank you very much. You see, the essence of this requirement is to ensure that the bank is not cited for conniving with companies who do not have license to operate a particular company. So the main essence is for us to ensure that you are in good standing with your regulator, and you are also in good standing with the industry requirements that you find yourself. Now, the essence, so with this essence, first, you bring us the expired license. We expect to see that between a period of this period to this period, you were in good standing. We know the date that it expired. We look at evidence that you have made payment, there is receipt to that effect, and that your application is being processed. There's an element of risk that the application may or may not be granted, but it all boils down. You see, there's no fast rule on the part of the bank to decide whether to accept or not to accept. It all boils down to the relationship between the customer and the bank. You see, a company based.
Some customers are first-time customers, so we don't.
Yes, good blue chip. We don't even. There's some companies that we don't even require for these things. It depends on the. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hello. I can hear you.
Yes, it all boils down to the relationship between the customer and the bank. Some may overlook. Some may also insist for fear that.
Madam Lucy, can you please mute your? So continue.
Yes. So there are some customers that we have never asked for said documents. Evidence that the company was previously with a license is enough. Evidence that you have paid for renewal is enough. But depending on the risk profiling of the company or the institution, the bank will want to proceed and insist. The bank will want to insist that a duly license has been issued. You get it? Assuming that MTN is faced with this challenge, who will want to insist and wait for it to be issued before you now do business with it?
We are not MTN, we are all small market enterprise.
So it's the risk profiling. It's all about the risk profiling. Once you are high, once your risk profile is low, everybody is comfortable to take the risk with you. Once your risk profile is very high, everybody will be careful and tread cautiously in dealing with you. That is the bottom line.
All right, and the next question is from John Amochi. John asks that, given that most SMEs do not have deep financial pockets to engage the services of a qualified secretary or directors, what options are available in Ghana to enable SMEs benefit from the services of qualified persons? So John no get cash, but the qualified person. So what's your advice?
Well, legally, the law requires that a company must have a secretary. And the law outlines the qualifications that a secretary must have. And so it is law. There's nothing you can do about it. On the practical side, what most SMEs do is to appoint one of the directors to act as a secretary as well. And so in the boardroom, one director takes minutes and records whatever goes on there, and the necessary extracts are issued, which is against the law stricto sensu. And so having a secretary is very important. You will benefit from a lot of things that comes with it. Having a secretary with a required skill and always will add a lot of value to your company. However, if the means is not there, it's important to start with what you have. And gradually, as you grow your business, you get the right people to manage it.
All right, and I think the last but one question is from Theresa Adoma. She asks that you mentioned disclosure by the directors.
Yes.
What is the level of disclosure? A typical example is that I am a director of, say, FBA. You're also a director. I know that we are coming to have business with another company which you may have an interest in. If you fail to disclose, me being a secondary person with the knowledge, does the law require that I also disclose to the board that even though Theophilus did not disclose, I know Theophilus is a director of a company we are about to work
Okay,
with.
okay. Third-party disclosures. This pertains to third-party disclosures. Now, the example that you cited, bank. For now, I must say that the regulatory regime around the banking industry is now robust and should I say, crazy. The requirement of disclosure is more straighter, is straight in that regard. So let me say that what pertains to the banking industry, if we should take that to be the norm, the disclosure in this regard is pertains to the individual director. If you know you have an interest in any transaction or any contract or proposed contract, you must disclose. If a director is on the board of that bank and that director knows that another director has an interest and he's failing to disclose, it is the duty of that director to disclose. See, beyond the laws or the regulations that pertains to the duty to disclosure in the Companies Act and other laws of Ghana, a director in the first place has a fiduciary duty to the company in itself, and this fiduciary duty is based on common law. It is the duty that is inherent in you being a director, and so where it comes with it is a duty that comes. It's a duty that comes with the.
This is your lawyer English. We don't understand.
It's a duty that comes with that automatically with the duty as a director. And so even though it may not concern you, you are always acting in the best interest of the company. So the yardstick is beyond the legal requirement to disclose. Based on your fiduciary duty as a director, is it in the company's interest to expose or to disclose that another director is failing to disclose or not? That is the standard we have to look at here. And for me, where I say it, and from my experience, I will advise that you are duty bound to disclose. If you don't have any interest and you know of any director who has an interest to disclose but he has failed to disclose, you are duty bound as a director with knowledge to disclose that no, this director must be excused from the discussions.
And then, I mean, this is a personal question. So if I'm a director in a company, I have other businesses, so I'm a shareholder of another company, which is outsourcing for or tendering for a contract in a company which I'm a director in.
Can you cite names like company A and B so that I will appreciate?
So I'm a director of company A.
Okay.
Company B has tendered in a bid to work for company A. If my company, which is the company B, went through the process, it was vetted, and then, I mean, my bid was the best bid. Would the fact that, and I also discharge the duties as an independent person, would the fact that I failed to disclose have anything to do with it? Because I feel that sometimes, even though you may not disclose, you would have discharged your duty in a very professional way. Does it affect it?
Yes, it's a very good and technical question, I must say. First of all, let's appreciate the fact that the duty to disclose is independent of anything. It is independent of its own. It doesn't depend on anything. Now, let's first look at why or the rationale behind the duty to disclose. You might not have influenced the process in your favor. You might not have altered or find your way out in making sure that your company's bid goes through. You might have stayed away from the process and your company probably might have come through the process as the best bidder for the company. But later when it is found, when you fail to disclose, and later when it is found that your company, you are director of company A, and your company, being company B, was the one who eventually won the bid, then your integrity as a director of company A is in doubt.
And these are more of a moral thing. I mean, in
Yes.
terms of morality and integrity are separate.
You see, whether you influence or you don't influence, there's no evidence to that effect. And you cannot rely on the fact that I did not influence the process to say that I am independent, and then that there's no, because of that, there's no need to disclose.
Practically in Ghana, I may form a company, but I form it and give it to expertise to work for me.
Good. Yes.
I don't have any control. I don't have any directions. I leave them to work in because probably they are into agriculture. I know nothing about agriculture, but I formed it.
Perfect.
If they bid for if they bid for any contract and they win it, I mean, even though on the records I have my name there, in terms of influence, in terms of decision making, in terms of management, I'm independent. So how does that still come back to me if I
Yes, that's a very good question. Now, you see, yes, it's true. You may not have been in a direct contact with the business, not being on the front of it, but you are an ultimate beneficial owner. And that alone is enough grounds or enough basis for you to disclose to company A. And that is the reason why banks are required by Bank of Ghana. They are required by all the institutions to ensure that they do an audit of all their customers to determine the ultimate beneficial owners of these corporate customers, so that in dealing with them, we know who are behind them. Now, the KYC is now so messed up in the sense that if you have bad records, forget about banks. You can't deal with a bank. You can't work in a bank. It is so robust now at the moment. So on this one, it is true. And I share your sentiments. You may not have been in direct contact with the company, a director on that company, on company B, or be an exposed shareholder, but you still remain a beneficial owner. And that alone is enough for you to disclose your interest to company A.
All right. Unless, of course, more questions are coming. If you have any question, you can type it off or unmute yourself and ask. We spent close to 1 hour, 30 minutes, and I want to express our gratitude to Theophilus for accepting the invitation and then giving us a very deep knowledge in corporate governance. Theo, we are grateful. I know that very soon we'll be.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Dennis.
All right, Theo.
Dennis.
Thank you for a very good presentation. I have one last question for you. I have one last question for you. You know, before foreign companies come to invest in, might have been doing very well in their host countries. So when they come, they might be multinational enterprises, not small-scale enterprises.
Yes.
But then in any case, do Ghana allow foreign companies to invest as small-scale enterprises?
No. If you look at GIPC at Ghana Investment Promotion Center, it actually restricts the caliber of business or enterprises that foreign investors can actually engage in. If you want details of it, I can go into it and list it, but I think the time will not permit us. It's restricted. It's restricted to
capital requirements.
It's restricted small scale SMEs, those small businesses, provision stores, credit vouchers, water sachet issue production. Those small ventures are restricted.
Those are left for Ghanaians.
Yes.
And then of course,
and so for such businesses, there was a limit as to the area that you can venture in. There is a restriction on the kind of investment or capital requirement that you need to bring on board before you'll be allowed to operate. But these laws are being applied flexibly because of the need to allow for cooperations among states. Trade liberalization has allowed for these laws to be trampled upon. But in a sense, there are laws in Ghana to restrict that. And if we're a foreigner and we engage in these small enterprises, you might not be able to go through a legal process unless you let Ghanaians front it for you and you stay behind.
But fronting is also illegal.
If they have a joint venture, then they can evade the law. If they have a joint venture, then they can evade the law.
No, so the GIPC actually allows for that. Yeah, the GIPC allows for joint venture. There's a minimum requirements that a local investor is supposed to bring. Depending on the level or the capital requirements and the option that will also be available to you. There is an option that allows for a local investor to partner with. There's an option that allows for a wholly owned enterprise to be owned by a foreign investor, depending on the capital requirements. So if your money is big, you can come and do it all by yourself. If your money is small, they will allow for a minimum requirement from a local entrepreneur.
All right. We spent so much time today. Theo, thank you very much. We are grateful. And
you're welcome.
For all the people who stayed with us from the beginning, those who joined us midstream, those who have come and left, I mean, we are grateful. We are grateful. And there's also an assurance that going forward, every week, either Friday or Saturday, we'll be coming your way, we'll be coming your homes with exciting series. We are yet to go into family law. We are yet to go into land law. If you have any family properties, it's advisable to build on it as a young person. If you want to do a will, what are the processes? If any law that you can think of, and the speakers are. There's one, Frank Jetwa. How do you ascertain ultimate beneficial owners? How do you ascertain it? So as part of, okay, Theo, answer that. Theo, is your show, answer that.
Frank, this is tough. This is tough. So as part of the KYC documentations, yeah, the best we can do is to go for the documentation in regards to the shareholders and the management team. That is how far per legal requirements we are required to take. But yes, for this must.
Yeah, currently to the Registrar General's Department have also brought in something called the Ultimate Beneficial Owner Declaration.
Yes.
So yeah, directors are encouraged to submit voluntary beneficial owners so that you can track your route of accession or route of.
But you see, I guess Frank's question, I guess Frank's question and where he's going to see Onesimus. Just as you ask, what if I'm an owner of company B? I'm not fronting it in the books. I'm not a known shareholder, a director, or anything of that sort. But behind the scene, I am the one that controls it. I am the one on which actions and instructions the duly appointed directors are accustomed to act. How will the regulator or how will the bank be able to identify me as the ultimate beneficial owner? In the books, you may have somebody else named there as a shareholder, but I'm the shareholder of the shareholder. So in this instance, how do you now trace? In fact, Frank, it's a very difficult question you've asked, and up to now, the regulator in the banking industry, together with all the stakeholders in the financial industry, are struggling. No, let me not use the word struggling. Are actually fighting to come up with ways to track all of this, and it still remains a challenge. Now the law has an extent to which it can go. The rest remains with how practical.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hope to see you all, and all the people that stay with us, we are grateful.
My pleasure to have you on the show.
Next week, Friday or Saturday, I think the topic we'll be discussing has to do more with family law. So by Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll share the flyer and would encourage that all of you also log on to our social media platforms. On IG, it's The Lawyers Diary Global, and then on Facebook too, it's The Lawyers Diary. So thank you, and we are grateful.
Hello. Yes. This is Paul.
Paul.
Yes, you were done. Yeah, but I'm hoping not that this probably banking something. That's why some of us were invited. I hope subsequently you will be invited to also learn more from our lawyers on the platform.
Oh, sure. What we do is that when the flyers come, we send out the flyers with the meeting ID, and then we have a database. So if you register through the link, we'll send the details through the link.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yes,
that's fine.
And we on our social media pages too. If you like them, anytime we are. So it's a week in, week out thing. Every week.
Okay. Okay, so, that's fine. Okay.
Subscribe to our IG page, our Facebook, and then our YouTube channel as well. Because for all the things that we discuss, we'll be uploading them on YouTube as well.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
All right.